Today I'm headed into my 7th province and back to the city where I grew up. Along the way, I'll visit the Longitudinal Centre of Canada, marking the geographic halfway point of my journey across the country. But before that, I'm making an adventurous stop deep in the Manitoba wilderness to investigate one of Canada's most famous UFO encounters. There's also a giant fish, a giant ditch, and a few other surprises. So stay tuned for the next leg of the Great Canadian Road Trip. Alright, checking out of the hotel now, out of Kenora. Gonna check a little statue on the way out of town, and then head towards the border with Manitoba. So let's start another day, going back home. There's a giant fish over there, which I want to check out. It's across the highway there, but we're gonna have to go through the underpass through McLeod Park to get there. And another nice day outside. Not as sunny. There's still a bit of a haze in the sky. I'm not sure if that's still from the forest fires. And this is the highway that'll take me out of town, out of Kenora, back onto the number 1 towards Manitoba. And coming up here we have the Husky the Muskie. So the Husky the Muskie fish here is a 12-meter tall statue and constructed way back in 1967. And it was designed to reinvigorate the tourism industry within the city. And to this day it remains a nice little photo spot when people enter or when they depart Kenora on their voyages throughout the Lake of the Woods area. So here's a good shot of the town of Kenora. I was there yesterday to watch the sunset. Kenora is one of Canada's prettiest towns in my opinion. Time to get moving. Headed to the border with Manitoba. We got a little bit more of Ontario to drive through, but we'll be in Manitoba shortly. It's going to be an interesting crossover because after the border with Manitoba, we'll still remain in the Canadian Shield a bit, but then we'll soon hit the prairies, where the landscape will change quite dramatically. Alright, just on my way out of town there, I stopped by a fishing and hunting store to pick up some bear spray, because I'm going to be doing some backcountry hiking soon, but also in the later part of this trip, and I'm scared to death of bears. They eat you from the organs first, so bears will eat you alive. You know, tigers and lions, they'll kill you first. They have the respect to do that, but bears, they don't give a fuck. So hopefully I don't have to use this, but just in case, we got some good handy bear spray. So I've officially crossed the border into Manitoba, and we've entered the 7th province in my trip across Canada. Oh, it feels good to be back in my home province. Feeling great. And entering Winnipeg is going to be something special as well. But I'm going to enjoy Manitoba for the next 7-8 days, I believe. So let's see what Manitoba has to offer. Nice little map showing how far I came from the point here, Cape Spear and St. John's, all the way across. And here we are now. I'm going to be spending most of my time in the south, so won't be going up too far north in Manitoba, but I'll be driving into Winnipeg, and then from there to Portage, and then I'm going to explore a big part of this area because this is where I was born and grew up for the first part of my life. And we'll be in Riding Mountain as well and then head to Saskatchewan. Thank you. Yeah. Feels good. So between Winnipeg and, between here and the city of Winnipeg, there's a few more stops I want to make. And one of them is quite interesting. So stay tuned for that part. All right, we pulled off the highway. There's a beautiful ranch right here. So I pulled off the highway here because we're right out near the area called Falcon Lake, which is a town and pretty much a getaway spot for a lot of Manitobans that have cottages around here. But this spot is also a very interesting place because a UFO incident took place here several decades ago. So I'm gonna park the car soon. We're gonna get out and do some backcountry hiking, and I'll talk more about this special spot that we're headed to. I'm on an isolated dirt road just north of Falcon Lake. The reason why I came here is because of a famous UFO incident that happened here on May 20th, 1967. Now, there's been a couple very interesting key UFO incidents across Canada through its history. One in Nova Scotia and another one in Newfoundland and a few other small ones. But this one here in Falcon Lake in Manitoba is the most well-known. And we're going to go check out the site where a Winnipeg resident purported seeing and being affected by a UFO. And it's in these woods up ahead. Now the crazy thing is there's no official trail to the UFO site. So in my detective work on the internet, I found the GPS coordinates. So I'm going to use my Google Maps or my Apple Maps to hopefully find the place up in these woods here. And we're going to check the spot where several decades ago, a Winnipeg man had an encounter with a UFO. So I've got my drone here, my iPhone to get me the GPS coordinates, and of course the trusty bear spray. I don't want to get mauled by a bear, but let's head into the woods straight ahead, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this UFO incident north of Falcon Lake. So it's officially known as the Falcon Lake incident, and again, it occurred on May 20th, 1967, and on that day there was a Polish immigrant to Canada by the name of Stefan Michalak. He was 51 years old, and he was an amateur geologist. So he was up in these hills and this forest area here looking for quartz. And as he was hiking here one day, he had an encounter with the UFO. According to Apple Maps, I am kind of on the right track. I want to head north soon, but it looks like the trail is taking me that way. Yeah, you can see we're rising in elevation here. I'm not really sure where I am going. Wow. What I do for the content, eh? Yeah, my main goal of traveling across Canada was, just to experience a trip of a lifetime. One thing I've always dreamed about doing is traveling across my country. But along the way, I've been trying to tell some stories, historical, cultural, and political stories about Canada, to have a better sense of what the country is. And I've keyed on some key topics like the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in Quebec, significant stories in Canada, but also other lesser well-known ones like this Falcon Lake UFO incident, which makes this trip across the country quite fun, because I get to approach some different angles towards Canada's history and culture. Okay, so we've achieved a little opening in the woods here. Okay. This is promising here because it's... So I first heard about this story about Stefan Michalak's encounter with the UFO on a TV show called Unsolved Mysteries, which was a popular show back in the late 80s, early 90s. And they actually interviewed the man, and he told his story about his encounter with the UFO. Stefan Michalak claimed he saw 2 UFOs in the sky that day, with one landing close enough to touch. When he approached it, a blast of hot air burned his chest and stomach before the craft lifted off. Disoriented and injured, he made his way back to Winnipeg, and his story would go on to become one of Canada's most famous UFO cases. Alright, I'm going to take up the drone. Alright, great success. Ticked off another thing I wanted to do in this trip across Canada. And now, time to make my way back to the car. And my car is still there. Nice. Alright, off to Winnipeg with a couple stops in between. And near the UFO site it also sits a ranch or a stables. Falcon Beach Riding Stables. And you could also do horseback rides up to where I hiked today. So you have the options of doing it on your own or with a group, just hiking it up, or getting on some beautiful horses to do that. So that's another option if you come UFO hunting like I did today. I want to make a rest stop and get something to eat. All I've had today are like 3 cups of coffee. Well, thank you so much. What a joke. They sell breakfast and sandwiches and melts and hot dogs. So I decided to do restaurant and convenience store. So I got a protein shake, 42 grams of protein, that's good. But then I have a sweet too, so I got a caramel chocolate bar you can't get in Asia, so one I really loved. And I also got some Big League Chew, so more sugars, not good. But I balanced that out with 2 pieces of grilled chicken. Alright, nice. They seasoned it a bit with some salt and I'm gonna chow down. So getting the protein in today, but also a lot of sugars. Pretty much my diet on this trip. A lot of protein and a lot of like sweets. Not too many vegetables, some fruits, blueberries a lot, but yeah, fine dining. Bon appetit. Starting to see more and more open fields here, so this might be the transition line between the forested area and the last limits of the Canadian Shield and the beginning of the Great Prairies that stretch across 3 provinces of Canada. So we're entering the Great Plains region. Alright. Made it. So, driving along the highway, this is definitely the transition zone on the #1 highway. And you see there's the forested area I was driving through. And on this line, just right around here, we're entering really flat prairie. So the trees have gone away. Let's see this shot from above. Yeah, there's definitely a noticeable change there from the drone as well. So this part of the number 1 highway is just after a place called Paradise Village. Beautiful name. All right, let's get back on the road. You see, it's crazy how flat things have become. This is going to be the next couple of weeks of driving for me, just fairly flat land like this. When we get to Riding Mountain and perhaps the Cypress Hills area is going to get a little bit more rolling, but most of the next few weeks ahead are going to be flat like this. We're at the Longitudinal Centre of Canada. It's sure good to be back on the prairies. Wowzer. So, the center point of Canada. And it's taken me 31 days and well over 5,000 kilometers to drive to this point. The train helped me out along the way, but basically over 5,000 kilometers to get to this point. And we're just halfway through. It's such an enormous country. When I was living in Korea, you could drive across the country in less than half a day if the roads are pretty clear getting out of the big cities. But this journey across this country is something else. Halfway there. Cup half full or half empty? For me, it's half full. All right, made it. And let's go back on this highway.
That's it! Back to Winnipeg!
This is the Red River Floodway. So it was developed in 1968. So it took 6 years to build at a cost of $65 million. The Red River Floodway is a massive engineering project championed by Manitoba Premier Duff Roblin in the 1960s. Before it was built, floods regularly devastated Winnipeg. Since then, this channel has diverted floodwaters around the city, protecting it for decades and saving billions in damage. Once criticized as Duff's Stitch, it is now considered one of the most successful flood control projects in the world. Yeah, cool. So that's the coolest thing about Winnipeg. I hope I explained that properly enough. I'll take the drone up and get a few shots of it, and then we'll head into the city of Winnipeg. Holy fuck, it's good to be back home. It has been well over a decade since I last visited here, and I'm curious to see how much the city has changed. So I'm going to concentrate on my driving, and let's go check out Winnipeg. Returning to my home neighborhood in Fort Richmond in Winnipeg. This is the neighborhood where I grew up, and I went to a local elementary, middle school, and high school in this area. And we're gonna visit the street and the home where I grew up. It is wild to return home to a place that you grew up. Thornhill Bay. There we go. The memories that come back when you, oh, these trees have gone much bigger and hovering over the street. And there we go. Straight ahead is the home where I grew up, the red door there. Well, I might take a little walk around my neighborhood and just reflect on kind of where I grew up and just take this moment in. Probably without the camera, do this thing on my own, but I'm glad to show you my former home. Played a lot of basketball in that driveway, shoveled a lot of driveways in the winter too, and very nice to be back here. Alright, I'm gonna take a little walk. Peace.